This is how we boil DI water for titratable acidity. We have this hot plate slash stir plate, set it to 500, and then just let it boil, roiling boil at 30 minutes, and then you're gonna let it cool to touch before transferring it to here, and then that'll last you about 3 days, and make sure you label it some way so you don't forget, and then you just essentially pour off into your beaker, and yeah. Alrighty, this is the titrations video for acids in plant tissue. So the first thing you want to do is get your plant tissue on dry ice from the -80 freezer. You can use Shane's, which is -70 upstairs, or Doherty's, which is -80 or so. So you'll put a good amount of dry ice in there. It'll last you a day. I have 2 plant tissues because one is for a certain type of process that involves LOD, LOQ, and then the other one's for spike recovery. So you're going to take this puppy over to the analytical scale, and we're going to weigh out 0.3 grams on this guy. And what I'll often do is either use those if there's no boats left. So sometimes there's smaller boats than this, and you can use those to weigh it out, and I find those to be the most effective way. But essentially, you're gonna tear it with the paper on, and then grab your 0.3. It just needs to be around, you just need to know the exact mass. And then you're gonna bring it back over here, and your setup will look like this, where you'll have a 100 milliliter beaker, a mortar and pestle, and then a sort of spatula. Okay, you're gonna fill up your 100 milliliter beaker with approximately 30 mils of boiled DI water that's been boiled on that hot plate. Okay. And the reason it's approximate is because the amount of water shouldn't change your pH in solution, given that it's boiled, so there's very little acidic content. There should be about equal parts OH to hydrogen ions in there. Okay, so we're going to take our plant tissue. I'm just going to use this one so we have more of it. And we're going to just say that I measured at 0.3, and then you're going to transfer that tissue into your mortar and pestle. So this is what it looks like. Here is where you can have your dewar filled with liquid nitrogen. If you're doing a liquid nitrogen extraction, you're gonna let it boil down a bit, because if you do it when there's too much liquid nitrogen in here, your plant tissue will actually explode out, in the sense that it'll just pop out and then you lose some mass, and so it's not very accurate. So you let it boil down a bit, and then you start crushing with the mortar and pestle, and liquid nitrogen you just kind of crush this way, as opposed to wet extraction, which I'll show you in a second. But essentially you do that for liquid nitrogen, and then for wet extraction you'll do just a nice grind up first, and you can always add liquid later, but I think it's good to start grinding pretty thoroughly first. It's definitely got to put some elbow grease in there, but you want to get it nice and slush like that. Try to break down the larger chunks, and then your 30 mils of water. Pour a little bit in there, some on the pestle. You'll just scrape it down to the flat side. That way it can make contact in this dish. You kind of just swirl it and stop suddenly and go the other way. Sort of get the larger chunks. But what you'll do, make sure there's nothing outrageous, no large pieces on there, and then you're going to transfer this into it. You got to pour pretty quickly so you can get the plant tissue like that. Sometimes you'll get some residue behind, some extra plant tissue, and what you'll do is just simply pour back in. You can use the spoon to sort of, or the spatula to scrape down the sides, make sure all the plant tissue's in there, and then off the spoon, and then you just pour it back in quickly. And then there's your extract. So now we'll bring it over to a calibrated pH probe, which will be calibrated every morning using these 3 calibration solutions, 7, 4, and 10. And then, oh, this puppy's not plugged in. Make sure your tools are plugged in. And so you have a 50 milliliter burette filled with 0.01 sodium hydroxide. And you can do that. I have another setup where I could just pull it back as opposed to always moving and having to shift this around. Okay, so we need our stir bar. You want a Teflon stir bar. You'll toss her in there and then rinse your pH probe off into some sodium bicarb. It is just water right now, but all of this will want to be neutralized completely, even though it's 0.01 base. And so you'll dry it off and you'll stick this thing in here. So once your pH probe is in there, you can turn this stir plate on to 3 is like the max you want to go, and then you want your stir bar sitting on the center of the plate so it's not banging around and making a lot of noise. Okay, and then you'll wait for this to equilibrate, and then you'll titrate to 7 and just go drop by drop and start counting your drops and moving a little faster every time.